go ahead and have a seat, please. If we have not met, my name is James. I'm on staff here at the church. If you have a Bible, paper Bible, electronic Bible, we're in Luke chapter 8 this morning. And as you're turning there, just want to let you know that we as a church, we exist to know Jesus and to make him known. Now, when I was in Bible college, I took a course that was called Life of Christ. And I remember one of the assignments that we had in that course was we had to memorize the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5, then Matthew chapter 6, then Matthew chapter 7. And we had to, our professor said we were going to write it out by hand. Like we didn't get to type it with autocorrect. It was by hand on loose leaf, and we had to get all the numbering right, all the punctuation. And I remember when he told us this, we just kind of all groaned because like we knew that was going to be a lot of work. But one of the guys in my class, I just remember him he was going like, what do we need to pass? What is required to pass? What do I have to get in order to pass this assignment? Now, it was a tough assignment, but it was rewarding after it was done. But that question, what is necessary to pass? What do I need to get? What score do I need to get? We kind of bring that type of thinking, not just in like academics, but in a lot of different areas of life. And sometimes we can even bring that into matters of faith. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, it says, "Now without faith it is impossible to please God, since the one who draws near to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." Now, if you're here, I'm just guessing for most of us that you want to say, like, I've got enough faith that pleases God. You want to be like, that whole rewarded by God thing sounds pretty good. So you're like, I'd like to kind of get in on that. And so that question that arises that when you read verses like that is like, well, how much faith do I have to have? How much faith is necessary? What's kind of the passing grade? Now, in today's text, we're going to encounter two people who come to Jesus in faith with needs. And so Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 40. It says, "When Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Just then a man named Jairus came. He was a leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house because he had an only daughter about 12 years old and she was dying. While he was going, the crowds were nearly crushing him." And so Jesus has just come back to Capernaum after being across the Sea of Galilee. Tim looked at this last week where he heals the demoniac. But he gets there. There's a crowd of people waiting for him. There's a lot of people interested in Jesus. His fame is rising. But in the crowd, there's a man named Jairus who's looking for Jesus. And Luke says he's a leader in the local synagogue. And the local synagogue, again, it would be similar to what we do here on Sunday mornings, where we gather together for worship. There'd be a lot that would take place there, but one of the things that Jairus would be responsible for would be organizing, arranging those services when the Israelites gathered, conducting the service, selecting who's going to participate, making sure it all happens in an orderly fashion. Now, Luke says that Jairus' 12-year-old daughter is dying. He doesn't tell us what she's dying from, but we get the sense there's not a lot of time. So Jairus is desperate for help. Now, as the synagogue leader at that time, like one of the leaders in the synagogue, Jairus would have been in a position of prominence. He would have some influence in the community, probably some privilege. His position might avail certain opportunities to him that were not available to every person. And so, like, if anyone, because of his connections, could get connected to the people who could help, Jairus was one of those people. And I'm sure when his daughter was kind of going downhill, the best doctors in Capernaum are called to their house to try and help. But Luke's saying they have been able to help. Like, she's still dying. And so Jairus' position, his title, has not been able to provide any help for his daughter's desperate situation. Now, at this point in Jesus' ministry, he's not welcome in a lot of synagogues, those places of worship, because the religious leaders don't think too highly of Jesus, so they're closing their doors to him. And we don't know what Jairus thinks about Jesus, but in this moment, in his moment of desperation, he goes to Jesus for help. And so what we see is that he has at least some level of faith that Jesus might be able to help him. And Jesus hears what's going on. He agrees to help. He starts heading for Jairus' home, but it seems like along the way, Jesus gets distracted. And so picking up in verse 43 of Luke 8, it says, a woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years who had spent all she had on doctors and yet could not be healed by any, approached from behind and touched the end of his robe. Instantly, her bleeding stopped. And so Luke's saying this woman has a medical condition that's controlled her life for about 12 years. And most scholars say it is like she's having a continuous menstrual period. And we don't know what's causing it. It could have been some sort of trauma. It could have been something hormonal. It could be any number of reasons. And Luke, he's a doctor himself, and he describes the situation. She spent all her money on doctors trying to find a remedy, trying to find a cure. But like, as Luke says, nothing's worked. And from that line, it's like she had some money available to go and get some help from the medical system of the day, but it hasn't worked. Now, Mark, in his gospel, he actually records this, and he's not quite as nice to the doctors as Luke is. And he actually says that instead of getting better after spending all her money on doctors, she actually got worse. She grew worse. And so, essentially, nonstop bleeding for 12 years. Like, that's going to take its toll on you physically. You're going to be anemic. You're going to be weak, but we have to understand that there's not just like the physical problems that come with this. There's also some social problems that come with this as well. Leviticus chapter 15, verse 25, it says, if a woman has a flow of blood for many days that is unrelated to her menstrual period, or if the blood continues beyond the normal period, she is ceremonially unclean, as during her menstrual period. The woman will be unclean as long as the discharge continues. And so, according to the Jewish law, what it was kind of saying is that her unceasing bleeding cut her off from most social and religious activities. And so put yourself in her shoes. Like, let's make it real. Like, for 12 years, you're not able to attend church. Now, for some of us, we're like, oh, that's okay. I'm not a big deal. But then for some of us, though, like that would be pretty significant. But it's not just that. It's like 12 years of missing holidays. Like for us, no Christmases with the family, no Easters with the family, not getting to celebrate birthdays, not even able to go to coffee with a good friend. Like that's her life. She has to live on the margins of society, and because of her condition at this point, it's like pretty much guaranteed she's not married if she ever had been, because by law, she cannot touch people, she cannot be touched. And so at this point, like she's probably unmarried or divorced. And so like imagine a life like that. Like I can imagine you would feel pretty hopeless, pretty down. But then we get this hint that something's changed something for this woman. Again, Mark, he says in Mark chapter 5, verse 27, having heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothing. Like that line, she heard about Jesus. Somebody told her about Jesus, and this leads to her having faith that Jesus can make a difference. And so what is it that brings Jairus to Jesus? What is it that brings this woman to Jesus? It's their great need. They're both desperate for help. And we've seen that position and title, money and medicine have not been able to provide them the help they need. Now, please don't get me wrong. Like, money can make some problems go away. Positions can make some problems go away, and medicine and technology, all those things, they can make some problems go away, but at a certain point, they reach their limits. Like think about it. We hear about wealthy and important people who pass away from diseases every day. It's in the news. And so there are times in life where position and title, money, medicine, technology, they reach their limits, but it's so easy for us. We know they have limits, but we trust in them until they kind of fail to provide what we need, and that's when we become desperate. And it's often that desperation, that we go looking for Jesus. Like if not everybody's here for the same reason, but I know for some of us, we are here because things in life are kind of hitting that proverbial fan. And so maybe a relationship is breaking. Maybe your marriage is on the rocks. Maybe you've lost someone you loved. You're hurting. Maybe you were called into the doctor. The diagnosis is bad. Maybe prospects are getting worse. Your kids are out of control. You're battling some sort of addiction. Your best laid plans for life are just falling apart. Now, whatever reason brings you here, we're glad that you're here. But often it's easy to think that we can handle anything that life throws at us until you can't handle it anymore. And it's often in that moment you go looking for Jesus because, like the woman, you've heard some things maybe about Jesus. You're going like, everything else has failed. Maybe he can help. And so Luke, he kind of hints, this woman, she sneaks in through the crowd. She doesn't want to draw attention to herself because like she's not really supposed to be in the crowd, but she hears that Jesus can do something. She has faith and she acts on that. And she goes, all I have to do is touch Jesus' robe and I'll be healed. Like that is big faith. That is strong faith. And for 12 years, there's been bleeding. There's been failure to be healed by human means. But with that simple touch, Scripture says she's fully and immediately healed. And I mean, like, I can't imagine the sense of relief that comes over her in that moment, but she's like, you get the sense, all she wants to do is like, okay, withdraw from the crowd and get on with her life. But that's not what happens. In Luke chapter 8, verse 45, who touched me, Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you. And so in Peter's mind, Jesus is asking kind of this ridiculous question because remember, Luke told us the crowd was crushing him. And so Peter is kind of going like, it's not who touched you, it's more who isn't touching you at this moment. I don't know, for some reason, I just picture this like a mob of screaming teenage girls, just like Jesus in a boy band, they're trying to get their hands on it. That's what's in my mind, I don't know. But someone did touch me, Jesus said. I know the power has gone out from me. When the woman saw that she was discovered, she came trembling and fell down before him. In the presence of all the people, she declared the reason she had touched him and how she was instantly healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. So the woman knows that Jesus knows that something's happened. She's like, I can't really hide. And so she comes forth and she tells her story. Now, I want to be clear, like, this is not a magical robe, like that anybody touches the robe and it's like, I'm healed. That's not what it is. Because, like, remember, Luke is telling us a lot of people are touching Jesus at that moment. But it seems like she's the only one who gets the healing. And so why her? Well, Jesus says it's because of her faith. Hebrews 11:1, it defines faith like this. Faith means being sure of the things we hope for and knowing that something is real even if we do not see it. Now, sometimes faith kind of gets a bad rep. Sometimes people say that the Christian faith is just wishful thinking. And I want to be clear, like, faith is not this tool that we get to use to manifest whatever destiny we should choose or to manifest whatever we want. That is not what faith is. Like, faith is grounded in the character and in the word and in the plans and in the promises of God. Faith believes, you know what, I can't see it, but I know it's true. Why? Because God has said it. Faith goes like, it hasn't happened yet, but it's as good as done. Why? Because God has promised it. Now, we might go like, this woman, she's superstitious. Like, all I have to do is touch Jesus' robe and I'll be healed. Like, but Jesus doesn't reprimand her. He actually applauds, celebrates her great faith. There's no rebuke. And that question, who touched me? It's not that Jesus is ignorant to what's going on. We're going to get to why he asked this question in a second. Like, God's power is always under God's control. It's not like he was out of control of his power for that moment. Like, Jesus responds to the faith that he feels present in that moment. But her faith was in Jesus' power to heal. She's heard about him, not about his robe. And she believes that Jesus possesses this great power because she's heard about what he's done for others. And her faith leads her to act. Like, here you find Jesus says, like, your faith has saved you. Or in other times in the Gospels, he would say to people, your faith has healed you. And again, if you're here, I'm guessing a lot of us have some interest in being saved. And maybe you do need some sort of physical healing, or maybe it's healing in another sense. Maybe there's something that's gone on in your life and you're just carrying shame or weight or burden, and you're going like, I could use some healing there. And we want a faith that delivers what we hope for. And so naturally that question arises, okay, if faith has saved you, if faith has healed you, well, how much faith is necessary? How much faith is enough? Scripture does not prescribe an exact quantity of faith that we have to have. Like Jesus says, the quality of your faith is to be childlike, like that type of trust. He does say, like, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you could tell a mountain to move and it will move, but it doesn't prescribe an amount of faith that we have to have in order to make certain things happen, to be saved, or for God's help to jump in. Like, I don't even know how we would measure that. Like, how do you quantify that? Scripture actually just says, like, you are to have faith. It says, have faith. And for some of us, we're like, okay, that's great, because I have big faith. I've got a lot of faith. I'm good. And then some of us were like, I have a lot of doubts. I don't know if I have much faith at all. You would describe your faith as small, insignificant. Now, Romans, 12:3, it warns us about putting too much confidence in the faith that we have. And I know that sounds weird, but I'm hoping you can track with me. It's kind of going like, don't put too much faith in your faith. Like if we put faith in our faith, it could become us like where we start to trust in ourselves and the size of our faith, and we go like, I'm responsible for everything that happens, all the good things in my life. Like, look at that good thing that happened. I made that happen because of my strong faith. You know, I wanted that thing and I believed hard enough and I made that happen because of they didn't get the healing. Well, you know what? They didn't have very good faith. And so like, well, they're not like me. Like we could start to put pride in the amount of faith that we have. And Romans 12:3 is like, oh, don't do that. Now, I believe more important than the strength of your faith is the strength of what you've placed your faith in. The late Tim Keller, he wrote, imagine you are on a high cliff and you lose your footing and begin to fall. Just beside you as you fall is a branch sticking out of the very edge of the cliff. It is your only hope, and it is more than strong enough to support your weight. How can it save you? If your mind is filled with intellectual certainty that the branch can support you, but you don't actually reach out and grab it, you're lost. If your mind is instead filled with doubts and uncertainty that the branch can hold you, but you reach out and grab it anyway, you will be saved. Why? It is not the strength of your faith, but the object of your faith that actually saves you. Strong faith in a weak branch is fatally inferior to weak faith in a strong branch. And so, like, don't get me wrong. Like, strong faith, big faith, that's a good thing. But more important than the size of your faith is what is the strength of what you've placed your faith in. And so it's not the strength of our faith, but the object of our faith that saves us. And so we're not saved because our faith was big enough. We're saved because our faith was put into Jesus Christ, who is more than able to save us. And so if you're Jairus, you like going back to Luke chapter 8, in this moment, you're probably feeling frustrated because Jesus seems to be wasting a lot of time. Like, who touched me? You're like, my daughter's dying. Like, this really isn't that important. Now, why does Jesus ask this question? Is it important? I think he's got his reasons for doing it. Like, it provides testimony to his power and his authority, which would cause other people to put their faith in Jesus just like this woman had. Like, she heard about Jesus, she believed, she acted on that faith, and she received. And Jesus is like, I need you to testify now to what I have done for you so others can hear and believe. And this is why we share our testimony with others. This is why we testify to what God's done. It also makes known to everyone that she's healed and she can kind of get back to a normal place in society. It's for her good. And so hearing what Jesus has done for this woman, if you're Jairus, I think like that faith you might have had, it goes up a bit. But it's like, Jesus can help this woman, maybe he can help my daughter. But it doesn't last long. Luke chapter 8, verse 49. While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." Like, man, that is so cold. Like, man. And this woman, while she's being healed, Jairus' 12-year-old daughter is breathing her last breaths. While Jesus is healing somebody else, Jairus' daughter dies. And like, just again, put yourself in Jairus' shoes. How do you feel? Like, in complete honesty, I would be frustrated with that woman for causing a delay. I'd be kind of upset with Jesus for wasting what I thought was precious time. There'd be disappointment. There would be anger. That line, like, your daughter is dead. Don't bother to teach her anymore. Like, that shows the level of faith that Jairus' household has in Jesus. Jesus can deal with sickness, but Jesus can't handle death. And Jairus, at first, he seems decently strong in his faith. Jesus can heal my daughter, but there are limits to what Jesus can do, and Jesus can't heal or bring back the dead. And we do the same thing, like, to different degrees. We put limits on what God can do. We're like, okay, that person, God could work in their life and he could save them, but that person, man, they are far too God. Like, they are messed up. God could not save them. We could go like, that disease, not that bad, just a minor thing. It's a rash. God can heal that. But like, man, did you hear the diagnosis they got? I don't think God can work there. And we kind of go, here's what God can do, what God can't do. We put a limit to his power. Now, Jairus is on the brink of getting what he wants, and the worst news comes to him. His only daughter is dead, and his worst fears become a reality. And it's like, that's kind of true to life, that you hear these stories where it's like somebody's praying for healing, and it just feels like God was too slow, and the person passed away. There's people who, like, they plan to dedicate their life to the service of God. They try and make everything happen, but it's like roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and nothing seems, it's just like constant frustration. They're like, this doesn't make sense. I'm trying to do this for you, God. And there's these things in life that can cause your faith to crash. That you can be on a spiritual mountaintop, and then you get a phone call, and you are in the lowest valley you've ever been in. And I think this is where Jairus probably is. But verse 50, it says, when Jesus heard it, he answered him, "Don't be afraid. Only believe and she will be saved." After he came to the house, he let no one enter with him except Peter, John, James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was crying and mourning for her, but he said, "Stop crying, because she is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him because they knew she was dead. So Jairus goes to find Jesus. His daughter's alive. His daughter is now dead by the time he gets home. And again, like, what's going through Jairus' head? Like, I failed. Was this a waste of time going to find Jesus? Like, I missed her final moments. And I think Jesus understands what's going, like, through his mind, because he says, like, don't be afraid, believe. And I don't think Jesus is like, don't be afraid, just believe. Like, I don't think he says it casually or haphazardly. I imagine he, like, looks Jairus in the eyes, and he says, like, it's going to be okay. Trust me. Don't let what little faith you might have in this moment diminish. Jesus challenges Jairus to maintain his faith. And sometimes that's a challenge, to maintain our faith. You get the diagnosis, you lose your job, your plans and doing everything right just don't work out. Like I shared before, it was, I think earlier this year, like my wife got a call from the medical system, and essentially falsely, but misdiagnosed with HIV. And like, I remember, like, we heard that, we had to sit in that for a few days, and like I was like, what, like, how, what, this doesn't make sense, this isn't possible. And like, that was where I was in that. It happens. And although Jairus is informed that his daughter had died and that nothing had gone according to plan, Jesus' words give him enough faith to believe, you know what, maybe Jesus can make a difference. And that's probably a brutal walk home. He's probably just got like this small ember of faith that maybe Jesus can make a difference. And whatever Jairus felt, he doesn't entirely accept the verdict of those who are mourning at his house, but he allows Jesus to act. And this is what Jesus asks all of us to do as we live in a world that scares us and at times says your faith is a foolish thing. Like during trials, Jesus is saying, I need you to have a calm, persistent, trusting faith. Again, a faith that trusts in his character, his word, his plans, his promises. And so the mourners, they stop crying long enough to laugh at Jesus in disbelief when he says, she's not dead, she's asleep. And Jesus is not denying that she's dead or her condition, just the permanence of it. Like sleep, he's using it as a metaphor. Her death is only like sleep. And so he puts the people outside as his answer to their mocking. So picking up in verse 54 of Luke chapter 8, it says, so he took her by the hand and called out, child, get up. Her spirit returned and she got up at once. Then he gave orders that she be given something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he instructed them to tell no one what had happened. And so once inside, Jesus takes the little girl's hand and he tells her to get up. No spells, no potions, just his touch and his voice. And the little girl hears his voice and she sits up alive. And her parents are amazed. And I'm willing to bet in that moment, Jairus' faith just kind of like shoots up through the roof in this moment. And Jesus brought his daughter back to life. And so in a matter of what was probably less than an hour, Jesus has dealt with both disease and death. He demonstrates that he has authority over both of them. Now, it's easy to think we can handle life or anything life will throw at us until we can't. And when things get difficult, when you become desperate, where do you turn? Again, positions and titles, money, medicine, science, technology, they're not bad things. I would say they are good gifts from God in their proper place, but they are not God. They have limits to what they can do. They can't provide help or hope beyond what they were designed to do. But here you see that Jesus is a friend to the desperate in that he invites anyone to come to him at any time with anything. And both the woman and Jairus, they reflect different aspects of faith. Again, this woman, she has strong faith. She hears about Jesus. She believes. She's like, all I have to do is touch his robe and I'll be healed. And Jesus celebrates. He applauds. He commends her faith. But then Jairus, I'm guessing his faith is all over the map that day. He's got some faith when he goes to find Jesus. It probably gets a bit better when he sees the woman has been healed. It probably goes way down when he hears his daughter is dead. And then it shoots up when he hears or sees that Jesus has the power over death. And so how much faith do I need to have? In this text, you see that strong faith is applauded, but weak faith is not rejected. Like faith is not a combination lock that we use to unlock our deepest desires, that it will happen once we hit a certain level. It's not how much we're believing for what we want. It's whom we're believing in. And so if your faith is grounded in the character and the word and the plans and the promises of God, faith is the foundation of your relationship with God. And like Jairus, there's going to be times where you struggle to understand God's timing on a lot of things. It's not going to make sense. Like, you'll be like, God, this is pretty important. Like, we got to put a rush on this. And God's like, no, we got some time. And there'll be other times where it's like, God, this isn't that big of a deal. We can take some time. He's like, no, we're going to handle that right now. He does things differently. And why does God heal some people and he doesn't heal others? Why do some people get the miracle while others don't? And like, I don't have a great answer as to why God does what he does. But like, my wife is different than I am. Her plans and her hopes are sometimes different than mine. And like, believe it or not, I don't always get my way at home. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, sometimes I disagree with the way she does things. I'm like, I would have done that differently. But at the end of the day, I trust that she loves me. I trust that she wants what's best for us, and she acts accordingly. And so faith is a trust that God has a better perspective on all of this than we do. Faith is a trust that God knows what is best, does what is best, even when he doesn't do it the way we would. Faith is a relationship, and we trust God's love for us. Now, remember, I started by telling you that guy in my class, how much do I need to pass Matthew chapter 5, Matthew chapter 6, Matthew chapter 7? Like, what do I need to get? I'm at 65%. And so I don't know if this was peak laziness or genius, but he figured out all I need to do is memorize 37 of those 48 verses, and I'll get a passing grade. And so that's what he did. He memorized those first 37 verses perfectly, but he never touched the last 11 verses. Now, he passed, but I'm going like, man, that was lazy. Like his mindset was kind of, here's what's necessary, and then I'll stop. Like, I'm not going to pursue any more than what I have to. And maybe that's the reason God does not prescribe a quantity of faith that we're to have, because that's not what he wants. Maybe God does not want you to put a ceiling on your faith. Maybe God doesn't want you to just kind of strive to hit the bare minimum and stop there and quit. Like, God wants relationship with us, and he wants that relationship to continue to grow as we learn to trust in his love and his sovereignty and his power and his wisdom with more with each passing day. So I'm asking you, who or what is your faith in? And relationship with God doesn't have to wait until things start going wrong. He's not just a friend for those desperate times, but a friend for absolutely every moment of life. And so if you want relationship with that God who has authority over every sphere of life, just like Jesus was available here, God is available for you, and he's done everything that he can to make it possible for you to come to him. That he sent his son, he atoned for your sin to make relationship with him available. And so if that's something you would like to do, we invite you to talk to myself, to talk to Greg after the service, and we'd love to guide you through that.